Well, Brent, we've got Washington, D.C. 50-state haunt tonight, and I'm going to tell you, it was really hard finding things to do with haunting or paranormal that weren't real blatant, obvious places.
Man, you're not even kidding.
I know, and I wound up finding two places that were pretty interesting for me, more for the historical aspect of it, but there's one for sure that's really haunted. The other one's somewhat haunted, but I've only got two for Washington. They're both a little lengthy. I wouldn't say they're super long, but they are a little lengthy.
Kind of mine. They're the same way. They're not really long. Historical aspects also, and without just doing the obvious Capitol and stuff like that. At the end, we can throw out a couple little things. It's kind of interesting facts that I found, but when it was looking for more of haunted places or something like that, going through this one, it was crazy because DC is small. So everything that I kept running across in good stories, and after I'd get into them, they would be like just outside of DC and Virginia and stuff like that. And it was interesting.
Yeah, I thought, and it's like me and you talked about earlier, DC used to be a lot bigger than it is now.
Yeah, it was, I say a lot bigger, but it was a lot bigger.
When it comes to the square miles, it was a lot bigger than it is now.
Yes, it was.
But for the little area that we were able to look into, I think we got some pretty good information. Are you ready to hop into the wheel spin?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, let's get on over. And spinning. We have Indiana.
Very nice.
All right, let's go over here. Let's type in Indiana. All right. Look at that. Our 50-state haunt's kind of getting episode 6. This is episode... Oh, no. You know what I forgot to do last time, Brent?
You didn't put it in there?
I didn't put Washington, D.C. for episode 6. We are on episode 6 now. So let's type in Indiana for episode 7. Huh. I can't believe I forgot to do that. All right, well,
it's fixed now.
It's fixed now. Yep. Are you going to want to start off tonight, or you want me to hop into one of mine?
Don't matter. Either way, if you got it and you're ready, go for it. Don't matter to me.
Okay. Well, then in that case, I'm going to talk about a house that is called the Octagon House. You wouldn't dare fathom why it's called the Octagon House.
I'm probably going to guess because it has 4 walls.
It's got a ton of walls on one. We'll get into that, but there's a bunch of walls on. So the lot itself is a triangle, and when they built the house, they had to build the house to where it could fit inside of the triangle lot.
So is it symmetrical as an octagon?
I don't believe so. I think they call it the Octagon House because, if I'm not mistaken, there's 8 exterior walls on the front of the house.
Gotcha.
It's a weird looking house, and I'll get some pictures sent to you.
Yeah, we'll put some shots of it. Yeah, we'll put some shots of it in.
Yeah. So we'll do a little history here. The Octagon House is also known as the Colonel John Taylor III House. It's located at 1799 New York Avenue Northwest in the Foggy Bottom neighborhood of Washington, D.C. It was built in 1799, hence where it got the address, for John Taylor III, who was the wealthiest planter in the country. The house was built because of one of his new family members, George Washington, who pretty much told him, hey, you're going to build this house in case we need to use it for presidential reasons, right?
Okay.
In September 1814, after British forces burnt down the White House during the War of 1812, the Octagon House served as a residence to James Madison and his first lady, Dolly Madison. It served them, I think it was like 6 months or something like that.
Okay.
It's only, so there's 5 houses that have ever served presidential residence in the history of the United States. This is one of the 5, and it's one of the 3, along with the White House and the Blair House, that still stand today.
Nice.
Yeah. The Talos had somewhere around 15 children, I think 13 of which survived all the way up until they were adults. 2, hold on, let me look at my notes. Yeah, 2 died in infancy. Anne, who was born and died in 1800, and Lloyd, who was born in 1815 and died in 1860. All their children were born between 1793 and 1815, so do the math there. John Taylor IV, who served in the U.S. Navy during the War of 1812 aboard the USS Constitution.
Okay.
He died in 1824 due to possible wounds he received from the war. You know, back then they didn't know how to treat things properly, so he had an infection that set in, wound up killing people.
Killed a lot of people.
Yes. His parents provided for his wife and his child after his death in their house, the Octagon House. Edward Thornton Taylor, George Plater, and Henry or Augustine were all born at the Octagon. President James Madison and his wife Dolly wound up moving into the Octagon on September 8th, 1814. Like I said before, after British forces burned down the White House. President Madison wound up ratifying the Treaty of Ghent, which is what ended the War of 1812. He actually ratified that treaty in the upstairs study of the Octagon on February 17th, 1815. Dolly, who is Madison's wife, the First Lady, was known to throw a lot of parties on Wednesday nights known as squeezes while they lived in the Octagon. The Talos ended up receiving $500 in rent from the Madisons for their 6-month residency at the Octagon. Don't you wish that you could rent a place for 6 months for $500?
Isn't that the truth? What year was that?
That would be between 1812 and 1815. No, that would be 1815 because they only stayed there for 6 months. So that was the year of 1815. 1814, late 1814 to early 1815 is when the Madison stayed there.
That'd be equivalent to $10,180 today.
Holy crap. Okay, no, we don't want our rent to be that much.
That was for 6 months, you said?
6 months.
Yep. So that was $1,700 a month.
Well, that's about average.
About average.
That's about average. For a real nice apartment, at least. The Octagon House was a host to many famous guests, including John Quincy Adams, Lieutenant General Lafayette, Commodore Stephen Decatur, and John Randolph of Roanoke.
So Decatur lived in the Octagon House for a time, you said?
No, they were just hosted there.
Okay. Just
guests, pretty much.
Because just so you know, his house is going to be one of the ones I talk about.
Is it really?
Yeah. The Decatur House, Commodore Stephen Decatur.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm going to be talking about his.
Oh, nice. Well, this is going to play in perfect then. So they had a basement. This was a 3-story house. If you include the basement, it's 4 stories. So the basement held a kitchen, and it was also the slaves' quarters. It was separated from the rest of the house by a double ceiling designed to block noise in the lower level from reaching the upper levels. There is, when you walk into this house, from pictures I've seen, when you walk into this house, there is this beautiful front staircase. And hidden behind that staircase are a bunch of narrow back stairs, like spiral stairs.
Right.
Where the slaves would come from the kitchen to the top 3 floors through their discreet service doors so that they could help.
Right.
You know, if they were summoned, they could go do whatever they needed to do. And how they knew that they were being summoned is Taylor had a very elaborate system of bells that were installed in the house. Now, the bells, obviously, they still are present there. And that's one of the elements of this place that's haunted is people will hear the bells ringing occasionally.
Nice.
The spiral staircase is not only beautiful, but it's also a piece of, I guess you'd say, haunting. Colonel Taylor and his wife Ann Ogle wound up having 15 children. Like I said before, two of their children, two daughters, died on these stairs. So both the daughters were apparently in love with two inappropriate men, one of which being a British officer and the other being a slave to the Taylors. They wound up confronting their father about their love, and the father did not like that. So as they're getting into this heated argument, the daughters fell down the stairs to their death.
Fell, quote unquote.
Now, that's what they specify. They fell to their death. Now, both of them died years and years apart from each other. And from the records, both accidents had the exact same similarities in each other.
Interesting.
So, in my opinion, I think Mr. John Taylor III might have had a little bit of a anger issue, maybe pushed his daughters, and they might have fallen to their death. Both of these daughters are known to be haunting this house. One of the daughters can be seen on very still nights in the form of a candlelight that ascends the stairs. The other makes her presence known at the bottom of the stairs, where her lifeless body is said to have turned over the edge of the carpet at the foot of the staircase. And today, the carpet, which is still there, no matter how many times you flatten the edge out, it winds up getting turned back.
Neat.
Now, the next ghost that's said to haunt the Octagon is none other than Miss Dolly Madison. You wouldn't think that Dolly would haunt this place because she only lived there for 6 months. It's not like a permanent residence. But in a lot of places in Washington, D.C., people say that they have seen Dolly in all these other areas. Pretty much the whole district, right?
Right.
So after the burning of Washington, and the only thing that they really have on her in the Octagon House is the simple fact that she held a lot of balls there. So maybe her parties and balls that she held there maybe kept her presence there as well. It can be detected from a smell of lavender in the house, which was known to be Dolly's favorite perfume and a very expensive perfume as well. But that's what I've got for my first one. I thought it was pretty cool, especially the history behind it. And the carpets that's there, it's like a rug. It's still the original one. And no matter what you do like that, they've tried the ice trick, the ice trick with the cup. They've tried that. Doesn't work. They've tried steaming it. They've tried ironing it. They've tried all kinds of stuff and nothing can flatten. Like they'll flatten it out. And the next day they come in, it's folded up again.
That's pretty interesting. No kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So I told you about the Decatur House, but I'm going to save it for last.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to talk about Old Stone House. That's going to be the first one I discuss.
Oh, I've read a little bit on the Old Stone House.
The Old Stone House is said to be the oldest unchanged building in Washington, D.C. It is located in the Georgetown neighborhood. This house is still sitting on its original foundation that it was built on.
No kidding.
So back in the day, if you've ever seen it, I've seen some houses that's built on those old foundations, and it's just like slate rock.
Right.
That's what it usually looks like. Yep. So it's still sitting on its original foundation.
There's no sinking of the house, nothing like that. That's crazy. They built a damn good foundation.
They did. There are some old houses that are close to where I am at right now that same thing. They still sit on the old foundations also. It's like slate rock.
That's crazy. I don't think I've ever seen a slate rock foundation, me personally. I've seen some houses that were built in like late 1800s, early 1900s that are still on like timbers.
Right.
And I mean, I just, even with the timbers, like you could see how they have to go in there. They got to shimmy it to level it out and do all that. But I mean, slate rock, you would think that slate rock would over time sort of deteriorate a little bit.
I'll see if I can find more pictures of, especially the ones I'm talking about, because the ones I'm talking about are very open air up under it, and you can see all the rock. Stone House, the one I'm talking about right now, all the outside walls go all the way to the ground, so you can't really see the foundation.
Right.
So that's if it is even. I need to see some pictures on the inside better, but that's if it's even an elevated, like a subfloor elevated, as in the ones I'm talking about also. So this house was built in 1765 by Christopher and Rachel Lehman. Stone walls that the house is built on, they're built from stones that was acquired from a quarry that is a few miles away upriver, is where they acquired some of the stones to build the walls. The other stones came from English ships. They were ballast stones that were in the ships.
Wow.
So whenever a ship came into port right over there, they would have stones to be used as the ballast, to keep the ship from flipping over. It balances it out. So whenever they put cargo on the ship, if they're taking cargo off, they put stone on. They're putting cargo on, they take stone out.
Right.
So just depending on whatever it is, there's stone there.
And those stones are pretty big too.
Probably. And well, there's a bunch of them. If you see the picture of this house, some of them are large stones. Some of them would be equivalent to probably like large bricks. Yeah. But when I say bricks, I mean more like cinder blocks, larger. I couldn't really find of where they were getting these ballast stones from. Was somebody borrowing these stones from the port and bringing them over there or what?
Borrowing indefinitely.
Right. I don't know how they acquired the ones that were ballast stones, but they did. The walls on the house are 2 to 3 foot thick. Just depends on, the wall that's there. And this house was built in 3 stages. So Christopher died the year the house was built. He died that year in 1765. His widow, Rachel, she wound up having to sell, and she sold it to another widow. Her name was Cassandra Chew. So when Cassandra got this house, she did more renovations on it. She added a proper kitchen onto the back of the house, which at this point in time, it was a single-story house. And she also added the second and the third floors to the house, and all of it was complete by the year 1775. She used different building materials than what they used originally when they built the first floor. So it has a different feel to it. If you go to the house, you can distinctly tell the first floor, the building materials there are different from the second and the third. The materials, the building, the architectural style, and everything are different as you go upstairs.
Everything's different.
Yep.
As it usually is if you have multiple people working on we'll just say a project in general. If I start working on a project, I could have it set out this way. You build it, and then here comes Mr. Brent in and says, you know what? I want it done a complete opposite an opposite way. So, and architects are very, very good at doing that.
We're going to talk about that a little bit more too in a minute.
Sorry for jumping.
When it comes to no, it has nothing to do with this story. I'm just talking about whenever we get done with all this, I want to talk about the White House for a minute, and we'll discuss some of that. They also say that it's different enough that when you go upstairs in this house, it seems like you're walking into a totally different house. It's that much of a difference.
You got pictures of this, yeah?
I do. And I will insert the pictures into this video.
Yeah.
The only reason that this house was never demolished is because of a sign that hangs inside the house. What the sign says has the lore that goes along with this house that kept it from being demolished. And that sign simply reads, George Washington's headquarters.
Oh, now that's pretty cool.
So the lore of this was, it was believed that George Washington and Pierre Charles L'Enfant, maybe I got that right, we'll try it.
Murder the names.
There you go. The lore is that they were meeting in this house where Pierre was drawing the designs for the new city of Washington, D.C. He was the one that was designing the layout for D.C. So the lore is that they met at this house to discuss said plans. And All of this began right after they acquired the land from Virginia and Maryland. The house passed through many hands over the years. The person that owned it the longest was the Chew family. Whenever Cassandra Chew, whenever she got up in age and she was about to pass away, she handed the house off to her daughter, and her daughter lived in it for a time until she remarried, and then she moved out of it. She also passed it on to family as well. Throughout the years, at one point in time, it was a clockmaker's shop was in the house. At one time, a paint shop was ran out of that house. A hat maker had his shop in there. It's suspected that the house served a little time as a bordello. I don't have what the years would be for that part. It was also a used car dealership at one point in time. And I'm going to put the picture in also.
For viewer reasons, can we give a definition of a bordello?
Bordello?
That too.
A bordello was a scarlet house. It was
like a brothel.
A brothel, a whorehouse.
Yeah. Pretty much a place where prostitutes would do their business.
In 1953, the National Park Service bought the house. It was petitioned that they wanted to make this a national landmark because of the lure of this being George Washington's headquarters. They spent $90,000 purchasing this house and property at that point in time, which that equips to be about
a ton of money.
$800,000 in today's money.
For a place that has that much history, though, that's actually not too bad.
So let's talk about that now.
Well, quote unquote history.
After they purchased the property and they began renovations on it, like I said, it's the oldest
standing house
on
original foundation.
Correct. What they call it? The oldest unchanged. So at that point in time, it's been a used car dealership and all this stuff. But when they got it, they took anything that was modernized out. Anything that had been done, they took out. They restored it to what it was.
Original.
The late 1700s.
See, now that, I like that. That's pretty cool. I like it when old houses are pretty much, I wouldn't say renovated, but brought back to their original form. It's just, in my opinion, I find an older house just amazing.
Well, as they were doing the work to bring this thing back to this form of that's when they found out that this was not the headquarters where they had the meetings. After they did some more research on it, they found out that the meetings were held in Suiter's Tavern. But the renovations were already in progress. Everything was going, so they just continued to restore the property back to what it was in that era's architecture.
Yeah.
And removed all the updated, like I said, all the modernization that it had up to that time got removed.
Okay.
And they said now it is about 85% period accurate.
That's actually really good.
And that's all the way down to furnishings as well.
Really?
A lot of the furnishings that are actually in this building to this day were donated from residents of Georgetown, from their hand-me-down furniture, furniture that's been around through their family. And
yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of the furniture was donated by them to this house so that they could have more period accurate and just, keep the history alive there.
Now, does someone currently reside in this house, or is it more like just a landmark museum type area?
No, it's a landmark museum. The National Park Service owns it.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So it's just like a museum now that you can go visit.
That would be interesting next time I go up to Washington, D.C., which I don't even know when would be, but if I ever make my way up there, that would be cool.
Yeah, if I ever go up there, I'd like to see this place. I probably will. If I ever get up that way, I've been up there once.
Me too.
I never knew about any of these places. So actually, I never went into D.C. I was just beside it. But,
see, I've been in D.C. I was a wee little lad at the time. We stood outside the White House and did all that. It's pretty cool.
If anybody is around there and they go there, there is an original piece that was built in the house, and that's a grandfather clock that was built by John Suter Jr. Whenever it was
the Clockwork House.
Whenever it was the Clockwork House, it was
Nice.
This grandfather clock was built there. The grandfather clock was sold back then after it was made. They tracked this particular grandfather clock. I don't know how they found this one, but they tracked this one down. They found it. They purchased it and moved it back into the house almost 200 years after it left the house from being made. It returned and it's back in the house now.
Really?
Yep.
Can we say lucky find, or someone was really freaking digging?
With that history that we went over with this house, here's the little bit of ghost stuff. So they say with no real tales to tell why the things that they believe they're there, there's not really anything to go upon. But they think that there's at least 11 spirits that have been seen or heard inside of this house. One of them is a woman in a brown dress. One is a blonde man with long hair and a blue jacket on. There is a woman in a rocking chair on the 3rd floor. Also a carpenter who might be Chris Lehman, the original owner and builder. I don't know why they think it might be him. Maybe somebody knows what he looked like. I don't know. There is a translucent woman seen cooking in the kitchen, and a woman with a lantern that walks around at night. You can hear the sounds of children running around, laughing and playing. Men and women's faces have been seen staring out of windows outside. EVPs that's been taken around there have caught the sounds of grunts and growls and whispers. But there's one particular ghost to this place that stands out. And besides the history, this is the one I wanted to talk about. His name is George. He's said to be the meanest and the cruelest of the ghosts that are around there. The lore is that George was a murderer in his life. When you're in this house, the stories are that people have been bitten, scratched, pushed, and choked by the ghost of George while they've stayed there.
Brother, that ain't a ghost. That's a demon. That's some demonology type crap going on there.
Demonology. He really hates women, and he normally attacks women first for entering his 3rd floor bedroom.
Nice. I'll let my wife go first.
You might not want to do that one, because it has even been said that women have been stabbed and sexually assaulted by the ghost of George.
Never mind. She ain't going.
They also say that if you're at this house, that you'll have a sense of dread, even as you're taking a tour around the house. If you go, that there's just this feeling of dread that just drowns everybody. There are also cold spots in the house that it don't matter what anybody does, these spots remain cold all the time. And with that, that's the story I have of the stone house.
Nice, Brent. I really like it. I really like that. Some neat history behind it.
Yeah, pretty much everything I read that in DC that I read about the history, it was really neat.
So to follow up on that, I have the Hay Adams Hotel. I don't know if you read any of it.
I did not.
It's a contributing property to the Lafayette Square Historic District. It occupies the site where the 1885 homes of John Hay and Henry Adams once stood.
Okay.
In 1927, Washington developer Harry Wardham bought the property. He demoed the homes, like completely destroyed them, and built a 145-room residential hotel on their foundation, designed by architect Myron Masrobian. It was built in an Italian Renaissance style. The hotel opened in 1928 as the Hay Adams House.
Okay.
Wardham's fortunes declined with the Great Depression, and he was forced to relinquish most of his hotel and apartment building empire in August 1930, with the exception of the Hay Adams Hotel. In 1932, Wardham defaulted on the hotel's loans, and it was sold at public auction to the Washington Loan and Trust Company. It's a little bit of the history there.
Did it say how much it was sold for?
It did not. It does. We're about to get there, actually.
Okay.
Hotel magnate Julius Manger purchased the property in 1932, renamed it the Manger Hay Adams Hotel, converted it into a transient hotel, remodeling the guest rooms and adding central air conditioning. Pretty much just made everything
modernizing
new.
it.
Yeah. The Manger Hotel family wound up selling the hotel to the Washington developer. They sold it to a Washington developer named Sheldon in 1973. Okay. He renamed it the Hay Adams. Not the Hay Adams Hotel, not the Hay Adams House, just the Hay Adams. He wound up selling the hotel to businessman Jeffrey L. Friedman and French hotelier George F. Mosey in 1979 for approximately $15 million. Friedman and Mosey sold the hotel to Los Angeles businessman David H. Murdoch in 1983 for $30 million. Murdoch would turn around and sell the hotel to the Liu family, founders of Sanyo, in 1989 for $54 million, who would turn around and sell the hotel to the B.F. Saul Company, S-A-U-L, not S-A-W, a Washington real estate company, in 2006 for $100 million.
I'm looking through modern pictures of this place right now. As you're talking, I've been flipping through their actual website, looking at it, and that place is still really nice.
Yeah, it is. The Hay Adams is said to be haunted by Henry Adams' beloved wife, Clover, whose original name was Mary Ann Hooper Adams, who wound up committing suicide in 1885 in her house. Obviously, this is before the hotel was built. Houses were purchased, demoed, and hotel was built. Her spirit is said to be walking the floors, trailed by the scent of almond, like the nut, almond.
Right.
Just for clarification reasons, there's a bunch of chemicals out there that smell like almonds. This in particular one that she wound up ingesting was called potassium cyanide.
Okay.
The home that they owned had a dark room, which was used for developing pictures. I know you know that, but for you that don't know that, a dark room is back in those days, you would have to take a picture, then you would have to develop that picture in a dark room to get the picture to come through. And you use chemicals to do so. Potassium cyanide was the main chemical to do that, to develop pictures back in late 1800s. She wound up ingesting that, which it did smell like almonds, and that's why they contribute the smell of almonds roaming the area occasionally to be her. There have been numerous amounts of locked doors unlocking on their own, radios turning on and off with no one in sight, objects being moved around from place to place, room to room even, and no one seeing anybody moving them. There's been some encounters from visitors who have seen full apparitions. They've even seen orbs, like they are able to physically see the orb, not on camera, but physically see an orb.
Yeah, with the naked eye.
With the naked eye, yeah. And that's actually really rare. From what I've researched, that is very rare. And then they have also, I think they said there's over 50 or 60 rooms. Like if you go in there, air conditioning could be set to, let's just say 72. And then all of a sudden it'll spike to 60. So a lot of cold spots.
Right.
Some even say that they've even heard a woman's low morning cries when you're on the first floor. So to get into a little bit of the history of Clover, the one who committed suicide. Now this is a legend. There's really no proof or anything like that. It's just kind of
just lore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So lore has it that Clover fell into a dark depression after her father's death, where she ultimately took her own life. When Henry found Clover's lifeless body in their bedroom, Clover had ingested the chemical potassium cyanide, which we spoke about earlier. It was used to develop film for her husband, Henry Adams, who was an American novelist, as well as Clover, who was a skilled photographer at the time. So they both used the chemicals to develop his novels or whatever he did, journals, as well as
right.
her pictures. It said that he took some some account for this because he left her alone knowing that she was in a depression. But he didn't. He never thought that she would ever take it as far as she did.
Right.
So he blamed himself a lot. In the midst of him blaming himself, he's a very well-known novelist at the time. So he told the cops and the press that, and he didn't want to ruin her reputation for being a well-known photographer. He told the press and the cops that Clover wound up passing away from heart paralysis, which is not true. Clover wound up dying at the age of 42, and she was never able to live in the home that she helped design.
That seems to be a reoccurring thing we run into with these.
Mm-hmm. When I say she never got to live in the house that she helped design, where the Hay Adams is, across the street, they purchased a lot and they were building a house there. The house was, I think they said, only years from being finished. She wound up committing suicide before they finished it. Some witnesses sometimes spot Clover's full apparition with that peculiar almond smell. Hotel staff often report faint scents of almonds. Clover is even known to disturb the hotel's chandeliers. She will literally, like, from what they're saying, the concierge.
Concierge?
Yes, the hotel's concierge reports accounts of the chandelier mysteriously swaying and creaking like it's about to fall, which leads a lot of enthusiasts to believe that that's Clover letting everybody know that she's still there.
Okay.
So after her death...
I'd like to see that.
All right. After her death, Henry wound up not knowing how to accept it because he blamed himself heavily. So all the love letters and all the letters that she ever wrote to him, he wound up burning them all. So maybe So maybe that's why she's still there, is more out of spite because he did away with her. Right.
Got rid of everything from her.
Right. Now, I mean, obviously, he was grieving. He never spoke about her death. He would never remarry. He also never spoke about her death. After her funeral, he once wrote in a novel or in newspaper ad, whatever, "During the last 18 months, I have not had the good luck to attend my own funeral. But with that exception, I have buried pretty nearly everything I live for." End quote. That is a deep, deep quote right there.
Yes, it is.
That's the Hay Adams. Not a lot of ghosts, but a lot of activity from one particular ghost.
Right. And a lot of history right there.
A lot of history.
I was just looking up the Hay Adams. I was looking on their site.
Mm-hmm.
So for Monday, July the 3rd, Tuesday, July the 4th, and Wednesday, July the 5th, $2,200 a night to stay there.
Holy crap.
On a normal week, it looks like it's normally about, through the summer, it's normally somewhere between about $500 to $700 a night. A normal Saturday is about $1,000 a night.
So what Brent's saying is, if you're a history buff and you like history and you've got money, go for it.
I mean, it's if you're going to go there, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, I do highly recommend, by looking at these prices, go Sunday through Thursday. Because it looks like it pretty much stays that way until the winter. The winter time comes, November.
Sure, it drops down.
Yeah, there's some $300 nights in November, stuff like that.
It's cold in DC in the winter time.
Yeah, thanks for the story. That was interesting. I was sitting here as you was telling that, looking through their website at the modern hotel that it is now. And
I'm almost certain I have a picture of the original Hay Adams Hotel back in the 1800s.
Right.
If I can find that picture, I thought I downloaded it. If I can find it. Everything I'm seeing is obviously the exterior is the same. Exterior is not going to change.
Right.
But there was one picture. There it is.
Of some of the interior.
It was a photograph from Clover, not from Clover, but from one of her descendants. This is an 1888 picture of the Hay Adams. Anyway, continue on about yours.
Last one I have is called the Decatur House. It's the one we was discussing about earlier, from Commodore Stephen Decatur. that he built the house in 1818, and now this house is a museum. It is at 748 Jackson Place Northwest. The first floor is the same as it was then, but all the upstairs floors have been modernized.
Okay.
So there was another Commodore named James Barron, and he was court-martialed for surrendering his ship, the USS Chesapeake, to the British forces before the start of the War of 1812. When he was court-martialed, he was stranded in Sweden at that point in time, and he was there for 5 years. While he was there, Decatur, he took every chance that he had. Whenever Barron's name was brought up, he took every chance he had to badmouth him about whatever, him giving up his ship, whatever it was, about how he shouldn't have been in the role he was in.
Right.
I don't know, if he found out about this stuff whenever he returned, or if there was just word through the ranks. But Barron knew how Decatur spoke about him regularly, and he wasn't very happy about it. So when he did return to America and was allowed back into the Navy after he returned, he then challenged Decatur to a duel, and Decatur accepted the duel.
Really?
Well, after he accepted the duel, they were going to have it Bladensburg Dueling Grounds. This is outside of the city limits because duels had been outlawed then in D.C. So for them to do it legally, they had to go outside of D.C. So on March the 22nd of 1820, Barron and Decatur both met at the dueling grounds. Other parties that were there with them, they were not very fond of Decatur. Most of them were in Barron's good graces as well. So as the two men were there to do their duel, they were instructed to stand 8 paces away from each other instead of 10, which is normal in a duel. They would go 10 paces and then turn and fire. On this duel, the rules were changed. Because of Barron's failing eyesight, they were going to aim at each other before they took their paces. So I'm just picturing in my head as both of them pulling their guns up. They're aimed at each other, and now they take 8 paces backwards. So they're looking at each other the entire time. So they go 8 paces instead of 10, with already have taken aim. The guns were fired, and Decatur was struck. The bullet smashed through his hip and severed several arteries. From that point, he was moved back to his house, and a crowd gathered outside of his house waiting to find out the news. After he got back to his house, the people that were there with him, they wouldn't let his nieces come in. They wouldn't let anybody see him in the condition he was in because they said he was in excruciating pain for over the next 12 hours before he did die from the wounds that he acquired.
He succumbed to his wounds.
So there was a crowd outside waiting for the news. About 12 hours after the duel happened, at about 10 p.m., somebody came outside and did tell them that Decatur was dead. After the news of the unfair duel, no charges were still brought against Barron for the unfairness of the duel or for them having the duel. Decatur's funeral took place on March the 24th, and then it was the largest funeral up to that point that the funeral had ever seen. I think they said it was like over 70% of the city attended the funeral.
Dang.
His widow, Susan, was forced to sell many of their possessions, and then she moved to a more modest home. He was a high up, obviously, in the Navy, and they used to, his wife would put on parties, I guess you would say, gatherings. Mm-hmm. So even after she had to move away from this house and into a more modest home, she still rubbed elbows with the socialites, and she was still, throwing parties.
Yeah.
So the ghost aspect of this is people say that you could see, and when I say people say, this is going back to back then as well. People said that they would see Decatur looking out of the windows at the people downstairs, down on the streets. It got to be a point that the people walking around said it was so unsettling seeing him in these windows, they bricked the windows up. Even to the current times, those windows are still bricked up. And it is said that you can still see Decatur sometimes walk down the steps from inside the home and walk out of the back door with a pistol in his hand.
No kidding.
And that is the story of the Decatur House.
Well, that's really good, Brent. I enjoyed those stories. I really did. Like I said, there's a ton of history.
So I want to talk about one other thing real quick. You were saying about the architecture being different on everything. So one of the, I'm going to say lore, but I think it's more kind of fact-based as well. I didn't like gather any information. I just wanted to speak on it for a second. But that's the same thing with like the White House. They said when the White House, and I'm talking current White House that's there now, because the White House has been burnt down 3 times previously. The current White House that's there, when there were different stages of it being built, they said like the basement part and there being presidential escape routes and stuff like that, that no contractor that came in there to do the work, none of them would finish any leg of any of this. They would only be contracted to come in and just say there was one section of this. There might be 8 different contractors that work on this, where nobody knows the complete plan of how this thing, any of the tunnels that were there, nobody knows the complete plan of where they go, where they branch off to, or anything like that. Just the contractor that was working on that particular section, he knows his section, and that's it.
I wonder if they did that for confidential reasons as well.
Well, I mean, if you want to go into the lore of it, my mind just went blank. What's the word I'm looking for?
Conspiracy?
Thank you. If you want to go to the conspiracy of it, then, I mean, yeah, what you're saying is right. I mean, or at least it's at least going to be part of it, obviously. Right. But if you go into the conspiracy of it, there's that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Maybe a whole nother rabbit hole for another video.
Maybe so.
I do know, since we're wrapping this up, Brent, I do know I've gotten a couple messages from some folks that just got finished listening to the Alaska 50-state hunt. Mm-hmm. Couple episodes behind, but they have said that they want an in-depth on the Black Triangle.
Black Pyramid,
that too.
It's more of a...
It looks like a triangle.
Yeah, it's more of a kind of a 3D triangle.
Yeah, exactly. But they have said that they want a little more on the Black Pyramid.
Well, we might do that then. We might try to... that might be one of the bonus episodes. We might try to put something together to go to Patreon for now, possibly. Well, I enjoyed these tales. I enjoyed the research for... I got to be honest with you, I really enjoyed the research a lot more than I thought I was going to.
I really did too.
I did not fully go into the whole DC one thinking that I was going to find a whole lot that was going to be very interesting to me, but here we are. I did.
Yeah, it was, man, dude. It's like you were saying at the beginning, like you find 4 or 5 different places and you're like, all right, I got my, wait a second, they're not in DC. Yep. And then I finally found the 2 that I found, and I was like, okay, I'm sticking to these because these are pretty freaking cool. Got great history behind them. It's also got some lore and haunting involved in both of them as well. So, I mean, kind of hit a couple birds with one stone on this one tonight, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, we did. Well, we are definitely glad that you stopped by, listened to this episode. We're glad you're here. If you did make it to the end of this, throw us a comment in there. Tell us you made it all the way to the end.
Absolutely. Hit that like button. A thumbs up, man. That like button really helps. Spotify, if you're on Spotify, You can like, I'm almost certain you can like the podcast on Spotify as well. We can see those in the analytics too.
Yep. We do appreciate everything. And those are free things. Those are things usually just the only thing it costs is a second of your time.
And the only reason we're asking for it, one, is to see the involvement that our community is with us. We know y'all are involved. Obviously, I mean, we're still growing. We still get views. We're still receiving tidbits and information and constructive criticism, which we do ask for is constructive criticism. So we do appreciate any of that we get. But besides that, Brent, I think we're going to be working on some merchandise soon, right? We are. Hopefully it won't be very too much longer. And we're coming up with some different iterations of the logos, the skull logo to be precise, and some other things so that people can have, I guess you'd say, a variety to choose from. We look forward to hopefully getting some of that stuff out to y'all very, very, very soon. We're pretty much waiting on samples at the moment to make sure the quality is going to be good from this particular place we're using. And if it is, then it'll be here before you know it. So if you want to check us out on Patreon, you can find us over at patreon.com/StrangeEmbersPodcast. Or just go into Patreon and search for Strange Embers Podcast. Yeah, that works too. And that's patreon.com. Shoot us an email, StrangeEmbersPodcast@gmail.com. And with that, y'all have a good night, and we will see y'all next episode.